Well, look, debt, gross, indirect and direct debt is at 1.75 billion. But I think the big theme in this year's budget has been that we now say Mr. Picardo can't be trusted on the recovery of public finances, because in the worst financial crisis ever, last year's budget, they presented a budget that they said would be prudent, where it was an opportunity for them to show financial discipline. In that budget, they overspent by £90 million. The authority they had was to spend a particular sum. They overspent by 90 million. The net overspend of departments themselves was 35 million. That was an opportunity to show discipline. A lot of the tax charges that we are seeing now has been generated because, and people have to ask themselves, was it necessary, or was it because the government failed last year in keeping to their budget, and this is now the results. They're putting pressure on ordinary working families and small business because they weren't able to keep to their own budget.
So the GST has rejected the statement by the government that the deficit is due to spending on COVID, and that these measures are aimed at tackling precisely that, while acknowledging, of course, that there have been some economic effects from COVID that have been inevitable.
Look, this is smoke and mirrors by the government, which they do very well, but this is smoke and mirrors because let's be clear. The historic ratcheting of debt happened before COVID. We were already in debt by 1.3 billion before COVID. Yes, we have then had a deficit. We have then had hundreds of millions of pounds that we have had to channel into the economy because we wanted to sustain the economy during COVID. But then beyond COVID, last year when we were out of the lockdowns, there'd been the vaccination program, we haven't seen a lockdown for 17 months. Last year there was an opportunity to start taking the big steps for the recovery. In last year's budget, they've already overspent massively, and that was ill discipline that is now causing pressure on the vulnerable, the ordinary working families that are seeing tax rises, they're seeing electricity rise. Electricity has risen 8% today, but it rose 16% 12 months ago, so it's risen 24% in 12 months. There are rising tax, high inflation, and all of that is going to erode wages, and some of the other measures are going to cause risks on jobs.
Will you welcome some of today's measures, for example, on pensions and benefits, means testing relief for utility bills, and raising income tax at the highest rate? However, you've questioned raising the minimum wage in line with inflation, a measure presumably aimed at helping the lowest paid keep up with the cost of living. Does the GST oppose raising the minimum wage in line with inflation?
I haven't questioned the rise of the minimum wage. What I said was that I understand why, of course, we would want to rise the minimum wage. The point about this budget is that this budget does not deliver anything for small business. And when you're increasing the minimum wage, you've got to also ask, what are you doing to assist business that are on the financial edge? There's nothing in this budget for business. They've put a lot of businesses are on the cliff edge of survival, and they've layered over more pressure on business by, for example, this new charge that they've got to pay £25 per week now to help the government out of this. Now it's under the guise of COVID recovery, but is it COVID recovery, or is it to cover the overspend that the government could not keep to their own budget last year? Is that the real reason? And that's really what we're questioning here.
And on the treaty, you say the GST wants a safe and beneficial deal with a chance for public scrutiny and maybe even a referendum. What's your response to the government's argument that time is what has been needed to get it right?
Well, look, I mean, they say that, but of course this is painting their own picture like they want to. The reality is that the UK got its own deal now 18 months ago. We're 6 years on, we're the only ones that don't have a deal, and they paint it like we needed that period so that we could protect Gibraltar properly. And we say, look, you gave away certain rights anyway in the MOUs, the tax treaty and so on. If this is the way that you're protecting Gibraltar, well, no thanks, because we don't think you're doing a good enough job. We think that there should be a safe and beneficial agreement. We think that by missing the boat when the UK itself got a deal, we've by the delinking of Gibraltar and the UK, that has put us in a weaker position, and you see it now, and this is why it's taking so long.